Hi everybody, this is Warwick from BeeFlix on YouTube, and today I'd like to welcome Claudia Garrido from BeSafe and BeeHealth.eu, and we're going to be talking about bee health today and finding out more about what Claudia feels is the good, the bad, and the ugly about bee health going around in Europe. And so over to you, Claudia. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, hi, thank you for having me. Well, I'm a biologist, and I like to stress this because it gives me a certain perspective of things. Biologists, we like to think in systems and to see the whole picture.
You like the data, right?
Yeah.
It's good. Data doesn't lie, and it can't be skewed really.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So, and I'm working with bees in general, not only honeybees, with bees in general for about 30 years now. So I'm quite most part of my life I was dealing with bees. And it started all with bumblebees and solitary bees actually, and then I like to say that my patients have at least 6 legs. So then, because of the parasites and bee health and diseases, etc., I switched to honeybees, and did my PhD on the Varroa mite with some research projects in Thailand and Brazil. Yeah, and that's why bees kind of were part of my life for such a long time now.
But why bees? Can you tell us why bees, Claudia?
Why bees?
What was the thing that got you into
this is a little bit difficult because it's not. I was always interested in relationships, and bees are a very good model. So not only honeybees, but all bees are very good model for this. So they interact so closely with their environment. Their pollination services are essential for ecosystems. They have quite a lot of diseases and pests also that are interesting also for studying the relationships between different species. And I first had contact with them, bumblebees, as I said, while I was doing my master's with a practical part of university, and they kind of stuck to me. They interested me and never left me.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, right? Because
yeah.
I've got, my story goes back also about 15, 16 years, and I couldn't stop talking about bees after I went to my first basic beekeeping course back then. And it was about 3 or 4 months eventually, and my family started saying to me, "Listen, Warwick, it's enough now." I'm like, "We've heard this." I'm like, "Oh, come on,"
Yeah.
You just don't understand. It's like they're so complex. There's so many horizontals and vertical kind of aspects to them. It's just amazing, and the interconnectedness just blew my mind. And I'm a pattern person, so I love patterns, and I love how things kind of meld. Can merge together and how they connect, even if they don't seem like they are in the beginning. And so that's one of the things that got me involved with bees right from the start. I was literally, the bug, in this case, the bug stung me, and the venom's never left my system. So, but I mean that in a good way,
Sure. It's something. It's kind of the most constant thing in my life are bees, because it's for 30 years now, and then I didn't do anything else for that long. Working on bees.
So what is your mission? You're involved. So tell me a bit more about BeeHealth.eu and BeSafe.
Yeah, so it's BeSafe is the name of my professional activity. I'm a freelancer. I'm an independent researcher, and I'm based, let's say, on 3 different pillars. Or BeSafe is based on 3 different pillars. One of and all relate to bee health. No, one of them is the aspect of agriculture and bee health. So I mostly monitor studies. For registration of pesticides, for instance, and to see that the studies are done scientifically correct from the bee biology perspective. I give expert opinions and things like that. Then the main area where I work most on is actually in the veterinarian area.
Okay.
So to develop bee health products. That's what you mostly see on LinkedIn from me also, that I discuss different products or discuss different good practices, etc. for beekeeping also to maintain bee health.
Mm-hmm.
That's the second pillar, and the third is bee science communication.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is something I've done also for all this period. I'm working with bees. I'm also talking about bees and trying to, to teach people about bees. First only beekeepers, and now this is extended to a broader audience also. Yeah, because of the importance of bees as pollinators. Again, not only honeybees, but if working with beekeepers, of course, it's mostly honeybees. Yeah, and my mission is just to get good practices around in beekeeping and to improve bee health, also, or honeybee health, also because this influences other pollinator species, because honeybee diseases are transmitted also to other bee species. So this One Health aspects, it's called One Health, the connection between human health, animal health, and ecosystem health, so all non-managed species. And in case of the bees, this would also affect human health, for example, because of our nutrition. So we get the calories without bees, but we get the nutrients only with them.
Right, exactly. Okay. It's very much like a symbiosis of the whole system, isn't it? And that for me was the core thing about getting involved with bees when I started, is I could see the pattern of how the bees, not just honeybees, the bees and pollinators in general, along with all of the other insects, but they were kind of like the model insect for me at the time, because I was learning about them at the bee course, and I was like, if this is how the bees affect everything, and honeybees in particular, I was like, this is just exponential. Everything is intertwined. Everything is interactive. And if that's the case on such a simple level of bees to flowers to our plates, you got to extrapolate that to everything, don't you? I mean,
actually, pollination is the second most important ecological function. The very first of it is photosynthesis. So without green plants, there's no other life on Earth.
Yeah.
And then immediately comes pollination because of the maintenance of biodiversity, and for us mainly food security or food safety, so that we have enough to eat.
And security. And the biodiversity of that food, and every other ecosystem that goes with that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So,
and that's why part of my mission is also to make clear that bees aren't only honeybees because of this biodiversity aspect. So honeybees normally, honeybees are 9 species, but normally we speak about honeybees speaking about Apis mellifera, so the Western honeybee, which is native to Europe and Africa mostly. So this is only one species out of 20,000. And all these bee species evolved to have I don't want to put it this kind of with a purpose, but they evolved filling up different ecological functions. And one single species can't make up for all the other bee species, and even less for all the other pollinators. So if we're talking about South Africa or Africa in general, or the tropics in general, there are also bats and birds and so many other insects also as pollinators, and they are all equally important. So this is also part of my mission. You may notice it by how I'm speaking, to make clear that bees and pollinators aren't only honeybees. I think this is something very important to get cleared in the communication and also in policy.
Sure. And the thing is I've found over the last 15 years that there has been this the honeybee story, the save the bees kind of story has been, I think, one of the biggest sort of modus operandi stories out there that have spurred people on and opened their eyes. Majority of the public and the people that just the general people understanding of how bees and therefore all of the other kind of pollinators actually work together, right?
Yeah.
And how it's all intertwined. So from me, that perspective, my mission's been basically food security, but our motto is, harnessing nature's biodiversity. So it's not exclusive to any pollinator or any part of that ecosystem. But I've certainly found that the Save the Bees type of mission and message has been one that's prolific, and it's been like ripple effect through all of the different kind of levels of what people understand, about pollination and how important it is.
Yeah, slowly people are beginning to understand that bees aren't only honeybees, but especially the Save the Bees movement is kind of being hijacked by beekeeping. And I see this with a certain concern, because many people began beekeeping and thought, I'm doing something natural and I don't have to do anything. But as soon as the species as an animal is under human management, you have to take the responsibility for it. Now, so this affects also bee health. For example, all these natural beekeepers who don't treat against Varroa mites and lose colonies continuously. And the problem is that with these Varroa mites, they transmit also diseases, viral diseases, to other insects. So treating against this mite is essential also for the health of other insect species. And I'm seeing this with a little bit of concern, especially these urban beekeepers and natural beekeepers who think that they are doing something good, but without informing themselves and without educating themselves about their activity. They're doing more harm than good very often. So you have to learn things, that's it.
Look, I mean, I think I fully agree with you, and I think there's also on the one hand, I have had experience with a couple of my suppliers where they've especially with bee protection kind of or bee treatment kind of products. Some of the products that they came out originally with Varroa, and I know we're talking about Varroa a lot. I do want to talk about who the other contributors are to bee health, good, bad, and ugly. But I think it's important for us to just touch a little bit more on Varroa before we move on. And the one point I wanted to make here quickly is I know a couple of the guys that were producing some of the Varroa strips and things like that in the beginning, and found them, I mean, you must let me know, but in my research and in talking to them, in particular, there's a group in the UK that used to supply these, and they found that what was happening is that the Varroa is becoming desensitized, resistant, right? So when I heard about this, I was like, lots of people in South Africa are like, can you bring this in? We need this for the Varroa. And I'm like, no, I'm not bringing it in, because we're just going to create a worse monster, which makes it more difficult to, we need to do a natural management, as much as possible, natural management with Varroa where we can.
So
how do you feel about that? What's your
experience? So Varroa treatments are absolutely necessary. So natural in the sense of substances that have natural origin. I totally agree. But not natural in the sense I said before of these beekeepers.
Of just letting it go. Yeah. So if we can go back to natural treatments, what kind of things are you talking about there?
Well, actually, we're in beekeeping, we're in a very privileged position compared to other animal husbandry, because the substances of natural origin we have for treatments against Varroa are much more efficient than the synthetic compounds.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Tell me more.
So there are three main components, which are the two organic acids, formic acid and oxalic acid.
Right.
And then we have the essential oil, thymol.
Thymol? Yeah. Okay.
These are the three components we have at the moment in the EU as registered substances and substances that are proven that they're both efficient and safe for the bees.
Okay.
Because every treatment, if it's from not natural origin or synthetic, always has a main effect which treats against the Varroa mites, but also has secondary effects that can be dangerous for the honeybee colonies.
For the colonies as well as for the honey, right?
Yeah, also for the honey.
Yeah,
so,
and therefore for us.
Yeah, so that's why in the EU there are very strict registration processes for developing and registering bee health products or treatments against Varroa mites. So, and I insist on this so much, not only because this is part of my professional activity, but also because I'm quite happy to live on a continent which holds consumer safety at such a high level also.
Very high.
So this is also, of course, something to be respected in other parts of the world. So food safety is always important, independent of where you live. So the synthetic compounds leave residues in the honey, for example. No? So there you have the problem that if these residues are too high, it could be a problem for human health.
Right.
But it's also a problem for the health and productivity of the honeybee colonies. So you want to do them something good, and you may cause problems additional to those they already have.
Other side effects, right? Collateral damage, basically. Yeah.
That's also because. Yeah.
And sorry, also potentially also creating, you know, a resistance again from the Varroa to that over time.
Yeah, that's it. So and that was the point I wanted to make. So this is why it's so important also to use registered bee health products, because then you know that there's a proper management behind this. So everything that goes wrong must be notified to the authorities, and they come with the measures to avoid problems, be it for the bee health, for consumer safety, or for the resistance management. So we have problems with the resistance, so that the substances don't work anymore, mainly with synthetic compounds, because they act on very specific parts of the metabolism of the Varroa mite. No? When we look at the substances of natural origin, they have a more generalized action.
Right.
So, for example, oxalic acid acts because of its acidity. And this affects several points of the metabolism of the mite. So it's not so easy to develop a resistance against such an action. Okay, so in general, these natural substances are less prone for resistance than these synthetic compounds. Okay. Then we have also with oxalic acid or formic acid, for example, these are already substances that are natural components of the honey. So all the residue problem is much smaller also with these substances, but only if you use it correctly. This is another thing for the registered product, because there you have the leaflet where you can read, okay, this is how I have to treat.
Right. So what? So sorry, is that what would you recommend? What's the top format for that?
The best substance we have at the moment is oxalic acid. Right. Oxalic acid has the highest efficacy against the Varroa mite, and is also safe for the bees if used correctly, as everything. You know? Also, if you take only something against your headache, if you
exactly. You could bang your head against the wall and think, oh, that's going to solve my problem, but actually no. But
these are medicines, so you have to use them correctly. Then thymol is also a very good substance, but it isn't that efficient if the Varroa infestation is already too high. And with formic acid, we have the problem that it has to evaporate, and when the temperatures are too high, it causes problems for bees. So in areas like South Africa, for example, or any warmer areas, it's not
tropical arid area. Yeah, okay. Above what sort of temperature-ish?
Formic acid has best efficacy and safety for the bees with a mean temperature between 15 and 18 degrees, so quite cool.
Yeah, that's only in the winter time. Okay.
So for warmer areas, it's only a winter treatment.
Right.
Here in Germany, for example, also in the UK, you can use it easily because summer temperatures weren't that high. This is changing now with the global
global
climate
warming.
change. Global warming, so this is something to consider in the future also. But at the moment,
good point. Thank you for sharing that one.
The most independent substance of any environmental factors is oxalic acid. We have the problem with oxalic acid, though, that it acts only on the mites on the bees. So the Varroa mite has part of its life on the adult bees and goes into the brood cells to reproduce in there.
That's right.
And oxalic acid acts only on the mites which are on the adult bees.
Right.
It is used mainly as a winter treatment, or if used in summer, then you have to cage the queen to artificially have broodless colonies, and then you can treat. And this is quite a good method also. And it's used mainly in Italy and warmer countries in Europe, but also worldwide by now. So every treatment can be used if it's used correctly, and with the synthetic compounds we have the big advantage that they are easy to use. They're mostly strips, so you just have to put them in there. With the natural compounds, you have to pay a little bit more attention and observe more. You have a little bit more work with it, so that's kind of evaluation each beekeeper has to do before treatment. To finish this up, just treatment, you have to do it with a proper concept. So also according to the Varroa biology. So you have in the Varroa infestation raises exponentially during the summer months, and is already also very high when the bees begin to decline. The colony strength of the bees begins to decline. So that's the moment you have to treat absolutely to have healthy winter bees. So in regions like this one, and then again in winter to maintain the productivity in the following season. So this isn't trivial at all. So this is one of the most important things of beekeeper education I do also.
And management,
So most losses, colony losses, are due to Varroa mites. So we have to manage them properly.
All right. I wanted to ask you, I've come across, and I've used this a couple of times. I think I've got it from, it was a group I was following in New Zealand at the time, and they were doing drone cell harvesting or culling, maybe they call it that, where they would place a super frame in the brood chamber, and then the bees would draw out drone cells in that, and then wait for them to seal, and then effectively remove that frame. And is that have you had any experience with that? What experience have you had with that?
This is currently used also in Germany, or in Central Europe, let's say. And it's a good method to maintain the infestation levels low during the productivity season, so the honey harvest season of the bees. But it's not a treatment. in this sense, because it only reduces the pressure, the infestation pressure, but it doesn't kill enough mites or extract enough mites to keep it under the thresholds of damage for the colonies. So it's only that you know that you can use the whole season all the honey crops you want to use without having to treat in between and causing some issues for the quality of the honey. So this is why this is used. It's not a treatment as is. It's just a biotechnical measure to maintain, to reduce the infestation. And we talk of a treatment only if the efficacy is at least 90%. So it kills at least 90% of all the mites that are in the colony. No? The drone brood, this is why we do this. The drone brood is much more attractive for the Varroa mites. So the infestation in the drone brood is about 4 to 8 times higher than a worker brood. So if you remove the drone brood, you get out quite a big portion of the Varroa mites. That's why you reduce the pressure, the infestation pressure in the colonies because of this.
And also, at that point, it's also the young. It's the new like larvae or the new Varroa, isn't it?
Yeah.
That would have gone in there. So you're kind of stopping. You also what you call it? You kind of putting a pause or a hold on the production cycle.
That's it.
So that helps a bit as well, right? Yeah.
So, but the infestation of Varroa mites over the year goes like this if you don't do anything. So do you see this? So we start in the winter with quite low levels, and then it goes. This is an exponential increase. What we're seeing now with the pandemic, also.
Yes.
So this is an exponential increase of the infestation, and you have to cut this before the bees begin to produce winter bees. Because you need healthy winter bees to survive the winter. So with this drone brood, if you cut out the drone brood, you can reduce this development and like this, or make it a little bit more shallow, like this.
Yeah.
Anyway, you have to treat it. You have to treat before. Let's take another color.
I love this.
The development of the colony of the bees would be like this green curve. No? So it starts earlier, increases, and then goes down in late summer when the bees begin to prepare for the winter. And we have to treat before this moment here, when the number of Varroa mites gets larger than the number of bees in the colony.
Perfect. Okay. I love that. Yeah, that's great.
So I didn't prepare any presentation.
Oh, that's perfect. I love it. That's perfect. Yeah, lovely. All right. So Varroa, yeah. I mean, okay. So we're talking about it's oxalic acid, right?
Oxalic acid, yeah.
Okay, so that would be your first choice, followed by thymol, followed by
formic acid.
Formic acid.
The temperatures aren't high.
In between those ranges, yeah, and then some form of breaking or managing over a period of the spring through to autumn period would be the drone process, yeah. Okay, all right, that's good to know. What are the other role players in BL at the moment? What are the big kahunas that ones we should be watching out for? I mean,
there are several things in there. So second to Varroa come the viruses which are associated to the Varroa mite, especially if we talk about this ecosystem perspective I said before, this One Health perspective. Because with the Varroa mite, some virus infections, the deformed wing virus, for example, increased very much in prevalence and also in their effect on the bees than it was before the Varroa mite was there. So the virus existed already before Varroa mite came to Europe, for example, but the gravity of the infection became much larger because of the mite and because it's kind of injected directly into the bees instead of the bees feeding only in infected material or breathing infected air.
It's
So
like
the
an
effect,
IV. It was like an intravenous introduction of it rather than externally.
yeah, that's it.
Right.
So
Okay.
we have some human viruses also that if you just swallow them, you have a terrible diarrhea for a few days. If you breathe them, you have a little bit of kind of flu-like symptoms. But if they get into your blood circulation, then the heart grows, and these are all the runners that die during running because they were working out while having a virus infection. Also,
Yes.
it's kind of a similar effect with the bees also. So these are second, and currently between bee scientists, the viruses associated to the Varroa mites are discussed as the main cause that the Varroa mite has such a detrimental effect on the honeybee colonies. So this is very clear for the deformed wing virus. It's also one of the symptoms of the infestation of Varroa mites to see these crippled wings. But there are also other viruses in play, like acute paralysis virus, or also the chronic bee paralysis virus, which apparently isn't associated to Varroa mites, but I'm seeing it much more frequently in the past years than I had seen it before. So these are on the second place, I would say. And then we have also a gut parasite, Nosema serranae, which is a problem mainly for bee colonies in warmer climates. Apparently in cooler climates, the effects aren't that detrimental of this parasite. But anyway, we have...
how is that? Is there a treatment for that, or how?
No, we don't have a treatment for that at the moment. There are some feed supplements which act quite well on Nosema serranae, but they are not declared as medicinal products. So the efficacy and the effect on Nosema isn't really monitored. So there are different products out there. The best one.
That's Nosema, hey?
Nosema, yeah.
Nosema, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So what does that do to the gut? What is it actually doing to the bee?
It's a parasite that gets into the cells of the gut walls, reproduces there, and destroys the tissue of the gut.
Right. Okay.
And it disturbs the protein metabolism of the bees. So the bees, especially the queens, for example, that don't get enough proteins, and this affects the development of the colony, for example. A typical symptom, which is difficult to see if you don't have the necessary experience, is that in spring you see too many young bees in relation to the older bees, to the winter bees. So the relationship between young and old bees is disbalanced. And also the relation between bees and brood. So there are not enough bees on the brood area and tending the brood.
Not enough nurse bees. Okay.
That for me is an alarm signal. So when in spring I control a colony and I see this kind of orphan brood, not enough.
No nurses looking after them. Yeah.
Okay, here's something wrong. Okay. The problem with most bee pathogens, both viruses and also Nosema, that very often you see the symptoms, clear symptoms, when it's already too late.
Right. Okay.
So that's why the good practices are so important. So to keep hygiene.
Yeah. You see, sorry, but I mean, this is the one thing that's blew my mind, all the time whenever I've been, when I went to Ukraine and Turkey, and even here in the UK, and speaking with you and other like-minded people in Europe, that we're blessed in Southern Africa. I tell you what, because the bees there, because they still, I think, they're not so bred, you know what I mean? They're still fairly wild genetics, wild genes, that their health and defensiveness, their hygiene is just top quality, like DEFCON 5 type of stuff. so that with that we benefit so much from it that we overlook a lot of the stuff that Europe has to concern themselves with, like all the stuff you're discussing right now. And in fact, if and when we see a massive upkick of a spring brood, we're like, yeah, this is what we want. You know, this is the bees doing their thing, and we don't even think of Nasima.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever had anybody report or announce an infestation. I don't even think anybody's even testing it, to be honest with you.
And that's perhaps the
but
problem.
That could be the problem, right? But
to know about the issue and then look after it if it's there. No.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, although having said that, though, I've never experienced with my bees. I've never experienced the issue you're talking about of having too much brood, the imbalance of too much brood and not enough nurse bees, or orphan brood. I've never had that, so I can tell you then, just from your tip there, that it's never. I don't think I've had that issue with Nasima then.
The advantage in this kind of beekeeping is that you kind of use the natural selection for your beekeeping. No.
Correct. Yeah.
So this is different here in Europe because honeybees are mostly managed. We almost don't have feral colonies anymore.
True. Yeah.
And they were managed and also bred mainly for productivity, neglecting any health aspects.
And calmness and all of that. And I think that a lot of it, in my opinion, in my experience anyway, I can't prove this, but I think over the last century and a half, or maybe even probably more than that, that because that also the productivity's gone, had been the main selection, right, criteria.
Yeah.
But because of that, a lot of the defensiveness was also excluded, and therefore a lot of the hygiene went with that.
Yeah.
To some extent. And the defensiveness as well at the same time went with that, and therefore it's created this, somewhat almost say lazy bee, but it's sort of become a bee that's very productive, but doesn't clean house, so to speak. Is that a sort of a rough, perception of that breeding outcome?
So in general, health aspects weren't considered for breeding. So because people just didn't think of it that insects could have any kind of health problems, or that the higher productivity could influence this. We see this also with other animals in animal husbandry, which have been bred mainly for productivity. They have very specific and different health issues than their wild ancestors.
Yes.
This is the same also for honeybees, of course. The defensiveness is one of the mechanisms bees have to defend themselves against predators mainly, not that much against diseases and parasites.
Sure, yeah.
So these are two different things. So it's just a correlation and not a causal relationship.
Correct. No? Yes. I'm with you on that for sure.
However, depending on the disease, the hygienic behavior, for example, has a role to play. So we know, for example, for American foul brood, that there are some bee strains that are more hygienic and deal with this bacterial disease better. But for Nosema, for example, hygienic behavior wouldn't have any effect because it's an internal parasite. No? With Varroa mites, there are some people saying that hygienic behavior helps. The data I've seen don't convince me at all.
Okay, fair enough. That's good to know, though. Yeah.
So I should have mentioned American foul brood also with one of the big players in bee diseases. So this is not that much a problem in Europe in many areas because of the quite elevated hygienic practices very often.
Right.
So when we see it in restricted areas and where it persists over a long time very often. And usually when you find the bad guy who doesn't take care of his bees properly, you solve the problem of the whole region.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we've had a similar, American foulbrood wasn't in South Africa for years. I don't think there was over 100-year reporting until all of a sudden, must have been in some honey that came. That's the only thing I can think of it, that it transferred itself through some kind of untreated, unirradiated honey that came into the country, which is going on, unfortunately, black market type of stuff, and that got into especially in Cape Town. That's where it was first reported. Yeah.
That's why I talk so much about good practices, because feeding honey whose provenience you don't know and whose quality you don't know is a no-go.
Yeah, exactly. And not being, the problem is there's also corruption in the governments and the ports and all that too. That's another issue altogether. But all right. So what is the state of bee health right now? I mean, everybody, I've seen a hell of a big uptake of hobbyists and activists and products and sites and blogs and all sorts of stuff. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why I've decided I want to get involved. I mean, I've got another channel as well that's based in South Africa, but this is my new one for Europe and the world really. But what do you reckon is the state of bee health at the moment? Loads of people getting involved with bees.
So
where do we go from here?
So as I said before, what I see with a certain concern is all these people beginning with beekeeping without really knowing what they're doing. So the state of bee health in Europe, or perhaps also, mainly in Europe, was quite good because of all the education done by several institutes and associations, etc., for getting people to use the good practices. And this is kind of getting more difficult now, because all these urban beekeepers who don't really care about the good practices, and because they don't inform themselves. So this is a big risk for bee health in Europe, and surely also in other parts of the world, even at different levels, of course, because now if you don't have the most important thing for bee health, for the quality of products, or for everything in beekeeping or anything else, is to educate yourself and know what you're doing.
That's true. Yeah, exactly, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing this. We're doing this talk, right? I'm gonna share this with my Facebook group and my email database. And YouTube, obviously.
Sorry if I'm a bit preachy, but I'm a big advocate of education.
I'm the same as you. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I do as much of this kind of thing as I can right now, and I've been doing it for years with through email. But I find emails obviously email's only one format, and I'm thinking video now is becoming the biggest thing rather than
sure.
And just go viral, etc. I mean, that's been the case for years, but I think I need to just, if you and I doing this kind of thing is perfect. It's ideal for exactly that, to share and connect with each other. So I wanted to just also, so we've got, let's just maybe do we've got Varroa, we've got Nosema, AFB, American foulbrood, the viruses. What about the small hive beetle or other? Are there any other big players that we should be concerned about?
Small hive beetle for me is a minor player, to be honest.
Okay.
If good practices are respected. So it's all these horror films I've seen about the terrible effects of small hive beetles have been under conditions that I wouldn't call the people even beekeepers.
Okay.
So it's if good practices are maintained, then the small hive beetle should be a minor problem. Of course,
what are we talking about there? What, give us a highlight, high-end good practice.
So the most important things are to maintain the appropriate hive size, for example, and the material of the hive should be of good quality. So no crevices, no
cracks,
things like that, where the small hive beetle could hide. Then the colonies have to be strong enough, no, so that they can defend themselves against the.
And then everything else is strong, isn't it? It's systemic, right?
Yeah. So again, the hygiene is important. So especially as what I said before, these horror films I've seen, there were combs standing outside, leaning on trees and things like that. This is absolute no-go. You can't do this. So also not only for the small hive beetle, but also for American foulbrood or other diseases, this isn't good practice.
And
so,
even ants as well. You know, all the rest, wax moth, the whole lot. That's just the smorgasbord of
that's an absolute no-go. So if you respect these very basic rules of hygiene, then the small hive beetle is a minor problem, in my opinion. We are seeing this also in Europe, for example, because the small hive beetle arrived in southern Italy.
Correct. Yeah. When was that roughly? I mean, are we talking 5 years ago? What? Give or take.
Yeah, more or less 5 years now. 4 to 5 years. I don't remember. It was in 2016, I guess it was notified. Of course, the Italian government and the EU impose quite a lot of very strict measures to contain the beetle in this area. So there's a quarantine area, people can't move out. There are sentinel colonies around these areas to see if it's coming, it's expanding its range. But the beekeepers in this region aren't that concerned by now. So they were very concerned when the first measures came and all apiaries infested with this beetle were burned. So they were completely destroyed. That was a major concern for them than the beetle itself. So it looks like as if it's contained in Europe, because the level of beekeeping in southern Italy is extremely high. People really know what they're doing there.
Yeah, that's what I found as well.
So they maintain or coexist with the small hive beetle. We have to see, of course, what happens if it breaks out of this region and comes also into regions which don't have such high standards.
And all the procedures and so on and so forth.
So also here, the good practices, it's not good practice to smuggle in bees from I don't know where, just because you think that they may be better for you. We don't really know how they came to Italy, but the suspect is that it was packaged bees from Australia that came into Europe. And this is illegal.
Yeah,
it's illegal in Europe. It was illegal before the small hive beetle came, just before because of this. So, but we don't really know about this. There are rumors, of course. There are certain beekeepers which aren't very popular anymore, and they're with their colleagues.
Yes, I can imagine.
We don't have really proof for this, of course.
Yeah, we have the same problem with the AFB, with American foulbrood in South Africa, because it arrived somehow, and it arrived at the Cape Town port.
Yeah,
and somebody brought that in without it being. And so
So this is for me one of the largest threats for bee health, actually, that beekeepers very often think that they are outside of the rules, that they can do what they want, and it's not the case.
And we had the other issue. Yeah, you're right. And we had the other, and sometimes though, sometimes I don't think in this case either of these cases, I don't think there was ignorance. But we had an issue in South Africa, which is potentially a massive issue for, maybe for 10, 20 years from now, because we spoke briefly before we came on this interview, and we've got the Cape bee, which is the Capensis, Apis mellifera capensis, and it's the most unique bee because it's just got, well, the most unique thing about this particular bee is that its workers can lay both eggs, male and female eggs.
Mm.
And what happens then is that it comes into a scutellata colony, and the worker's pheromone can be as strong as the queen's pheromone, and therefore the scutellata can actually ball their own queen, and or treat the capensis worker as a queen. What ends up happening then is that you end up having either a hybrid, an unnatural hybrid, and or you have a cancerous almost overtaking or overthrowing of the scutellata colony, essentially over time, because the capensis worker goes through the queen excluder, for example, into the super and starts laying eggs in there. And eventually all of those workers will come out as females. They can lay eggs too, and therefore that colony can be hijacked really effectively and become a capensis colony effectively at the end of the day. But obviously they're just like any other honeybee. They do everything else that honeybees do. They make honey, they collect, they forage, they pollinate, they do whatever else honeybees do, except for this one thing. And the problem is that a farmer, whether he knew it or not, he should have known it, a bee farmer, because it is still legislated that you're not meant to take capensis across the line. And he did. He took about 250 colonies across the line to pollinate a crop, and whether he knew it or not, or he most likely did know that he shouldn't have done that. And introduced, obviously a couple of the queens or hives colonies split, and now we have colonies that have now moved from more or less the escarpment of South Africa into the interior of the country, and even up into the Highveld area, which is Johannesburg area. And so now we're finding hybrids and or full colonies that are Cape bees. And the problem with this is that it's extremely difficult to control because of their splitting, and the splitting what do you call it, characteristics of Africanized bees, African bees, scutellata and capensis. They spread as they go, and as they split and they track and do all that sort of stuff, and they seem to be moving more and more north. And the problem is they're going to get into Zimbabwe, they're going to go through this South African development area, and then from there it's going to be Malawi, and then Tanzania and Ethiopia, and eventually going to work its way all the way up into Europe. And it's going to start visiting us in Europe, within 10 to 20 years, let's say.
Yeah, who knows? Also,
who knows? Hopefully not.
Also, the conditions are becoming better. So.
Yeah. Look, hopefully not. But this is a big issue that I've been thinking about, and we've been talking about, and trying to manage and discuss, educate people about in South Africa, Southern Africa.
Yeah, that's a very good example why education is so important, because of course this beekeeper didn't mean to do any harm, all the contrary, I guess, because he was
just trying to pollinate, right? Make some
trying to pollinate a crop. But that's why it's so important to know what you're doing, and to know all the context also of what you're doing, and to respect the legislation. So the rules aren't there to disturb you or to control you. The rules are there for the better of the whole society in this case, or the South African legislation or German legislation or whatever legislation is there to ensure the coexistence of different people with different interests. And this is kind of a side topic, but my father used to say that, or tell us children, that your liberty and your rights finish where the rights and liberty of the other begins. So this is also applicable in this case. No, so a beekeeper can't do what he just wants to do because he thinks I am a free man or a free whatever. He has to respect also that maybe he's doing harm to others. No? And that's why we need rules to live together.
I like that. That's a really good philosophy. It's it's what we would call Ubuntu. effectively in Africa. Ubuntu is like we're all one, we're all in this together.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. So there's also maybe we've talked about bee health. We've talked largely about the internal, workings of the bee, but I'm also interested in just touching base quickly on what your thoughts of maybe something we haven't really discussed yet at all, which is the pesticides and insecticides, GMOs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Glyphosate, Roundup.
Yeah. So
is that something you feel? What do you feel about that?
Yeah, this is kind of my territory now, because when we don't, of course, pesticides are an issue. Again, if not used correctly. So we have different situations all over the world here in this case too. In Europe, we are kind of paradise, because the regulations are very strict here, and also in North America, perhaps we have quite strict rules for registration of pesticides, and bees and their effects on bees are monitored very closely, especially after larger mortality events we had because of the use of neonicotinoids.
Yeah.
And this is correct. We have to look at the effects not only on honeybees, but also on a broader ecosystem level. What I think isn't correct in this discussion are two things. First of all, that we focus too much on single substances like glyphosate. No, you mentioned glyphosate, and we have neonicotinoids before. And we have to look at the whole of pesticides and see how we can find a balance between the crop production, which at the moment still needs pesticides. If they need it to the extent that we are using them now, it's another discussion. And then to find the balance to bee health, not only honeybees again, but also other pollinators which are around. What we see is that the more natural or semi-natural habitat we have in agricultural landscapes or farmlands or orchards or things like that, the less severe the effects of these pesticides are on the health of the pollinators. So this would be a subject for talking
a whole nother conversation,
right? I'm trying to put it in simple words and to make my point on this. So for me, the primary issue are habitats.
Okay.
The primary issue are not enough areas with so if we're talking only about honeybees, not enough areas which guarantee a good nutrition for honeybee colonies.
Yes.
And so honeybee colonies are polylactic, it's called, so they like to forage on a wide variety of different plants. And what we force them into is in farmland, for example, to forage only on single crops, which bring a lot of honey, but don't offer the variety of pollen they need.
The monoculture,
Yeah. No?
And it's the same as what I normally talk about with this, is that it's the equivalent of us wanting to eat one meal. We eat the same meal every day for every meal.
Yeah, that's it.
No menu change.
Yeah, that's it.
How do we wouldn't survive with that either, or we'd be very malnutrition.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So this is an aspect of the whole discussion that isn't considered enough, in my opinion. So of course, pesticides, especially insecticides, are toxic for bees. This is out of any question. We have to regulate them more and look better on synergies between different products. If you use mixtures of different pesticides on a crop, if this has worse effect or the same effect as if you use the substances one by one and things like that. We have to test all these, and we have to regulate it and be very sure that the effects are as low as possible. But at the same time, we have to also make sure that bees and other insects have enough to eat and don't rely only on these crops. There's some very recent publications also about the effect of diversity of pollinators on crop production, and also on pests on the crops. So the more biodiversity we have in an area, in an agricultural area, the less the pest pressure is on the crop, and the higher the yield is also because of better pollination, if the crop is dependent on pollination.
Sure.
So biodiversity is a very positive for crop production as well, and we have to get this again across also to farmers and policy, etc., to find a new balance here. An example would be, for example, also the common agricultural legislation or in policy here in Europe, in the European Union. This was started after the Second World War, when it was important to feed people. So the main objective of this common policy is to maintain the food safety in Europe, so enough food for everyone. And the second is also the income of the farmers, to maintain the high level also of crop production in Europe. But biodiversity plays a role for both of these two factors, because, as I said before, we get the calories without pollinators, because wheat or rice or maize, etc., are all crops which don't need insect pollination, but we get the nutrients only by pollination by insects. So all fruits like apples and raspberries, etc., all these things, even coffee or chocolate is pollinated by a midge, by the way, not by bees.
Okay.
So we need the whole diversity of pollinators to ensure that these crops, which are important for our nutrition, get the proper pollination, and therefore also form the nutrients. The nutrient content is higher when the crop is proper pollinated also. So all this biodiversity aspect has to come into play also in this system. I draw again to show you another thing. So we have different interests here, no? So we have the farmer's income. Of course, the farmer has to produce our food in a way that he can make a living of it also.
That's right.
Then we have the food security for the society, independent of if Europe or everywhere else in the world. And then we have the biodiversity aspect in this. And the biggest benefit for society is where all these three areas meet. So this point here in the center.
Yeah.
And at the moment, we don't consider this biodiversity aspect enough. So we have something like this. So the area where the biodiversity comes in is very small. And we have to expand this to use the whole benefit for society also. So I get again very preachy when I talk about these things, because they are important to me.
Yeah, look, I'm in the same boat as you, and the thing is I'm excited to hear this, because a lot of conversations I've had are also unfortunately singularly minded. You know, they're only for the farmer, because the farmer needs to produce more, so they need to use all of this stuff that they need to use, including all the fertilizer and the glyphosates and neonicotinoids and the GMOs and all this. And I'm like, okay, but hang on a second, what is, and also even the soil treatment, how the soil, is being managed as well, and the runoff of all of that, how that works. Farmer's only one aspect, the farmer's got to, he or she's got to make sure they're making money and income and all that sort of stuff. But is there a better way? Is it the only way to do it? Just solely focus on the end result of getting that food out, the most amount of crop.
Yeah.
And is the most amount of crop, is the only way of doing that by doing it conventionally, like you say, from the time where lots of subsidies have been paid out after World War II, lots of fertilizer was put out, which was fairly toxic, not necessarily toxic, but it wasn't the best thing to be using in terms of a longevity of soil treatment and soil health either. And then, as you say, we've got the other angle, which is where we've got the pollinators, multiple pollinators. I'm talking about not just honeybees. A lot of them have been wiped out because of all the use of that heavy pesticides and even the incorrect use of fertilizer and the monoculture type style of farming. And then, like you say, we've got the governmental policies and all that sort of thing. It's a bit of a storm, really, of having to try and get these things, the symbiosis of these things together, and explaining to people that, hang on, guys, we actually can do better. We can do better with less pesticides by increasing the amount of biodiversity, not just from pollinators, but even a lot of permaculture studies have come out now where there's a lot of farming activity that's going, especially South America, which I think you probably will maybe have come across with, because that's where I've come across a lot of it, where they actually do a lot of co-growing in the farming, what we would term traditional farming. They do a little co-growing, so it's multiple crops amongst each other, mutually beneficial crops, which are in a very small area, where normally traditionally the traditional westernized way of farming and is monoculture only, And I think even in the UK they're returning to the fact where they're starting to get the farmers subsidize the farmers to grow, to replant their hedgerows and things like that.
Yeah, that's a point, because UK now unfortunately is in the EU anymore.
I know, yeah.
But this was also a point brought up during the discussion of the reform of the common agricultural policy in the EU, to bring up more of these aspects also of biodiversity. And there are several solutions, several systems that have been developed to keep the farmers' income high enough that they can make a living of it, ensure food security, and also are respectful for biodiversity. And this is my main criticism in this whole discussion is that we don't consider that change could be positive. So it's always very difficult for people to change anything. So all of us know that every new year we say, I will do more sports, I will have a better, eat better, etc.
The list is this long of to-dos,
So we have to think about how to make people understand, if they are farmers or consumers or policymakers or whoever, to convince them that to try out changes isn't a bad thing and could be even better. As you said, how can we do it better? And also, this is kind of something we learn when you are an entrepreneur. You know that you have always keep things improving,
developing, changing really.
And otherwise you can't survive. And I think this principle has to arrive also in a broader audience. But anyway, also in the public discussion, one of the problems I see is that, of course, neonicotinoids or glyphosate or fertilizers, etc., are a problem. But if we focus only on this small areas and we don't see the whole problem, then we won't solve it. So it's like planting trees alone won't help against global warming. We have to look at other things also. And this is the same also in this aspect. Of course, we have to see that we don't use too much pesticides, but we won't save the bees even if we prohibit all pesticides out there on the market. The bees won't be safe because we still won't have the habitat for them.
Correct.
Mm.
Yeah.
So we have to look at the different aspects of the problem and not focus only on single aspects that are important, but not the only aspect of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's like this guy. I've just had another. I had a different interview with somebody on last week with regards to bird guano fertilizer, and I mean the difference that they had in production, for example, crop production, and health of the tomato production was a difference of, he's been farming for about 10 years, this guy. And so his average, he's got some quite cool data, really good data over that period of time of these bricks, which is the what do you call it, the quality, let's say, of the tomato itself gets tested. Once it goes above 5.5, it doesn't get tested any higher than that. 5.5 is ideal. Anything below, I think 3 is like, well, no, it's not consumer worthy, really. And anyway, so he was obviously producing pretty above 3 all those years, but his production on average is about 80 tons, to give you an example. And which, you know, I can't remember how many hectares it was, but acres. But anyway, that's not too important. As soon as he started using this fertilizer, this organic fertilizer, the bird guano, from these guys we were talking to last week, Guano Boost in South Africa, his production jumped to 110, 115 tons.
Yeah.
And the bricks came back, the report on the bricks came back at 5.5. Well, it came back at 5.5, but they reckon that because the measurement doesn't go above that you obviously can't say if it was more than that, but they just said, you know, it was a massive improvement overall on both the yield and the bricks, or the taste basically of and the nutrient value of those tomatoes, just by simply switching to the bird guano fertilizer. And then obviously I said to him, well, if you started using bees or pollinators in that, now you're going to go from, so his production jumped by 35 tons, or give or take, what's that? It was roughly about 35%, from 80 tons to 115 tons. I said, now if you introduce bees or pollinators to that as well, you know, you're going to see an additional potential, and not only this was the other interesting thing, and this is why I say it's more of a symbiosis. You know, it's an ecosystem. It's not just like we talk about monocultures. It's a multi-tiered approach that we have to have there, because the other interesting thing that they clarified was that according to the data, they had a much longer flowering period. So not only did they get more fruit, they had a better fruit set of the tomatoes. They had the highest bricks that you could get, but they also flowered for 3 extra months, or they had a production period for 3 months longer than normal. So that to me also, I said to him, well, in that case, not only have you had all of that, but now you also have the potential of having bees having access to that bloom over there, or not just bees, but pollinators having access to that pollen and potentially some nectar over that period, for that longer period as well. Whereas, unfortunately, with GMOs, especially sunflower, now South Africa was the 6th largest producer of sunflowers in the world. This was about 5 years ago, and then at that period of time, all along since the time I've started beekeeping, I was quite heavily involved with the sunflower side of things, because it was such a big producer in South Africa. We had about 6 weeks of flowering time before the GMOs started coming into play. Now, pretty much any farmer that I contact is planting GMOs, genetically modified organisms. And the benefit for the farmer is that the bloom to seed period is only now about 3 weeks, 3.2 weeks long, versus the 6 weeks. So now you've got a much lower period of foraging on that allowed for any foragers, any pollinators that are foraging on that particular crop. But you also have a lower production in terms of honey as well. Yeah. And you've got the downside of it being a GMO, so where potentially the insecticide is built into the plant and the pollen, and then it comes out in the pollen. So now it's a bit of it's the egg or the chicken story, you know. Of course. So at
the moment GMOs are still not cultivated in the EU. So the GMOs are.
That's great. You guys are lucky. Hopefully, as long may it stay that way, huh?
Yeah, we will see. But the important point here was, I think, is also that what you said, that it's kind of a multi-tier system that we have to approach. No, so it's not only looking at single factors, but at several aspects of the whole system. And if talking about pollination, for example, when we talk about tomatoes, it's not honeybees pollinating them. It's bumblebees, for example.
Bumblebees, yeah.
or other bees that are able to do this bus pollination, so to shake out the pollen out of the anthers from the tomato plant.
Yeah, so carpenters and
yeah, but what is important also about this example you gave is that we need more examples like this of farmers trying to do things differently and showing other farmers, you see, it's possible.
Yeah.
You can work like this, because of course they accept it more easily from somebody who is on the same boat as them, as from the scientists or policymakers or whoever, who comes from above and tells them you have to do it this way. So also here we need this multi-level approach, the farmers educating themselves between them, so and just showing it works, and I have a better yield, the fruits have a better quality, and all this stuff.
No,
that's why it's so detrimental, I think, and it's really a bad thing to put all the shame on the farmers in this pesticide discussions, because farmers at the moment, even if you don't agree with what they are doing, they are not doing any illegal things.
This is it, and at the end of the day, they're under a lot of pressure as well, aren't they? They're under pressure for price, being able to get their yield that they want.
And with all the shame, we put them into a corner where they only can defend themselves and don't think about possible changes they could make. So it's not the right way to convince people just by shouting at them.
yeah, that's trying to put up here's a big signboard, it doesn't really work. I agree with you. Yeah. All right, so where to from here for bee health, and you? What's Claudia doing over the next year? What's your big focus?
Well, yes, at the moment I'm focusing actually on bee health products. So over the winter there will be some developments hopefully on this.
Okay.
And
you can share with us?
No, not yet.
Not yet, but in future. But in future, hopefully you'll come back to us and say, yes, Warwick, let's have another conversation.
If there are any developments, I can tell you, but
I'm not asking for now, later. Okay? I got first dibs, okay?
Yeah. You have the exclusive.
All right, great. Okay, and talks and things, or you?
Yeah, talks.
I know pandemic story is a bit limiting.
All these activities are a bit difficult due to the pandemic at the moment, but things slowly are moving and are getting better again. Though during the winter, I think there won't be any big conventions or things like that to avoid any problems with the pandemic. Yeah, but anyway, we will see. At the moment. I'm focusing mainly on the theoretical things, but this is the normal thing also during the winter.
Yeah, we also hibernate a little bit, eh? Yeah, that's great. All right, and so if people want to get hold of you, where are we going? Where do we find you?
Yeah, I have a homepage. It's bee-safe.eu. With a blog also. The blog is in English, so I think accessible for everybody. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. And also on Twitter, I'm quite active. I think these are my main social media channels. Yeah, and through my website you can contact me or write and shoot me an email.
Perfect. All right. And are we going to see you in Russia next year? If we can all go, I don't know if we can.
If we all can go, and I'm not sure yet because it's in a time I'm usually quite busy on other things and still in the field. So September is still a little bit difficult for me very often.
Okay. Well, I'd like to just say thanks again for joining us today. It's been fabulous having you on BeeFlix, and we look forward to hearing about your bee health products coming hopefully soon in the next year. Hey, hopefully.
Yeah, we will see.
Keep us posted, okay?
Yeah.
And maybe we must have another conversation. I think there's probably a couple of other conversations we could have over time. especially with regards to I'm interested to find out more about the nutrients, how the pollination actually increases the nutrients as well, because obviously I'm familiar with fruit set and the crop yield.
Yeah.
But the nutrient loading, nutrient type of enhancing aspect is a little bit new to me. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? It makes sense when you think. As soon as you mentioned it to me, I was like, of course that's going to happen, right? But I think I'd like to dig a little bit deeper with that one with you, and let's see if there's a couple of other conversations we can have around that. That'd be awesome. All right. Fantastic, Claudia. Thanks again, okay?
Yeah, thank you too.
Take care. Speak to you soon, all right?
Okay.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.